Marcus Chen had been staring at the same maintenance panel for 47 minutes when the first explosion rocked the Federation research station. The vibration traveled through the metal flooring beneath his knees, rattling the scattered tools around him like dice in a cup. He paused, holding a plasma coupling in one hand and a molecular welder in the other, waiting for the second impact that would tell him whether this was an accident or an attack. The second explosion came from the opposite side of the station. Definitely an attack. Well, that's not good, he muttered to himself, setting down his tools with the methodical precision that had made him one of the most requested civilian contractors in this sector of space. Marcus had spent the last 3 years bouncing between Federation outposts, fixing everything from life support systems to quantum computers. It was steady work, paid well, and kept him moving through the galaxy at a pace that suited his restless nature. The emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the maintenance corridor in a pulsing red glow. Somewhere in the distance, an automated voice began reciting evacuation procedures in 17 different languages. Marcus recognized maybe 4 of them. The universal translator in his earpiece would handle the rest, but right now it was mostly telling him what he already knew. The station was under attack, and he needed to get to an escape pod. He gathered his tools with practiced efficiency, sliding them into the worn leather belt he'd inherited from his grandfather. The old man had been a maintenance worker on Earth's first orbital stations, back when humans were still figuring out how to live in space. A good tool is worth more than a good weapon, his grandfather used to say. Tools build things. Weapons just tear them down. Marcus had always found wisdom in that philosophy, even if recent events had tested its limits. The corridor shuddered again, and this time the lights flickered and died completely. Emergency power kicked in a moment later, but the brief darkness had been long enough for Marcus to hear something that made his blood freeze. The distinct whine of Krillian energy weapons charging up somewhere nearby. The Krillians were not supposed to be in this sector. Hell, they weren't supposed to be anywhere in Federation space. The insectoid race had been relegated to the Outer Rim territories after their failed rebellion 3 decades ago, their once mighty fleet reduced to a handful of outdated cruisers that spent most of their time raiding cargo convoys. They certainly didn't have the firepower to assault a Federation research station. Unless something had changed. Marcus made his way toward the nearest escape pod bay, following the evacuation route he'd memorized on his first day aboard the station. The corridors were strangely empty. Most of the research staff had quarters closer to the primary pod bays, which meant they'd probably already evacuated. The few security personnel aboard would be trying to buy time for the civilians to escape, following standard Federation protocol. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with Dr. Yilon Voss, the Centauri xenobiologist who'd been studying the unusual microorganisms they discovered in the Outer System's asteroid belt. She was pressed against the wall, her normally pristine lab coat stained with something that looked suspiciously like blue blood. "Marcus!" She grabbed his arm with one of her 4 hands, her large black eyes wide with fear. "Thank the stars. I thought everyone else had evacuated. What happened to you?" He examined the stains on her coat more closely. Definitely blood, but not hers. Centauri blood was silver. "Krillian boarding party," she whispered. "They came through the lower docking bay about 10 minutes ago. I was in Lab 7 when they breached. They killed Dr. Reams. Just shot him down when he tried to surrender." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. The Krillians he remembered from the history feeds had been fierce but honorable warriors. They followed the established rules of warfare, treated prisoners according to galactic convention. Summary execution of surrendering civilians wasn't their style. "How many?" he asked. "I saw at least a dozen in the main corridor. There might be more." She gestured toward the pod bay with her lower left arm. We need to get out of here. The security team tried to stop them, but she didn't need to finish." Marcus had noticed the absence of weapons fire. Either the security team had been overwhelmed quickly, or they'd retreated to a defensive position. Given that there were only 6 security personnel in the station, he suspected it was the former. They moved carefully through the corridors, staying close to the walls and pausing at every intersection. The station's layout was designed for research efficiency, not defense. Long, straight corridors with minimal cover, wide-open labs with floor-to-ceiling windows, central atriums that prioritized natural light over tactical advantages. It was a peaceful place built by peaceful people who'd never imagined they might need to fight for their lives inside it. The sound of Krillian voices echoed from somewhere ahead, their chittering language untranslatable by Marcus's standard equipment. The Federation's Xenolinguistics Department had never been able to crack their complex pheromone-based communication system. It was one of the factors that had made the Krillian rebellion so difficult to predict and counter. Dr. Voss tugged at his sleeve, pointing toward a side corridor that would take them away from the voices. Marcus nodded, but as they changed direction, he caught sight of something that made him pause. Through the transparent aluminum window of Lab 5, he could see a Krillian warrior standing over a computer terminal, its forearms working frantically at the interface. The creature was massive, easily 7 feet tall, with the characteristic chitin armor that made their species nearly immune to conventional weapons. But what caught Marcus's attention wasn't its size or its natural armor. It was the device attached to the computer terminal. He recognized the sleek crystalline structure from technical manuals he'd studied, a Vorthan data extractor. The Vorthans were the Federation's primary technological rivals, a race of silicon-based beings who'd perfected information warfare to an art form. Their data extractors could crack any known encryption system and download entire databases in minutes. They were also strictly controlled technology, available only to the highest levels of Vorthan military command. "Dr. Voss," he whispered, pulling her into an alcove. "What kind of research was your team doing here?" She looked confused by the question. "Microbiological surveys of the asteroid belt. We've discovered some fascinating organisms that seem to thrive in hard vacuum." "Why?" "Dr. Reams, what was his project?" "Quantum communications research. He was working on improving the range and stability of subspace transmissions. It was all theoretical work, nothing that would—" Her eyes widened as understanding dawned. "You think they're here for our research?" Marcus nodded toward the window. "See for yourself." "Doctor..." Voss peered around the corner, and her silver skin paled to an almost translucent shade. "That's a Vorthan extractor." How did the Krylians get their hands on Vorthan technology? It was a very good question, and Marcus suspected the answer wasn't going to be pleasant. The Krylians and Vorthans had been enemies for centuries, their fundamental biology and philosophy making any kind of alliance nearly impossible. If they were working together now, something significant had changed in the galactic political landscape. A new sound reached them from the direction of the pod bays, the unmistakable whir of escape pods launching. Someone else was getting off the station, which meant the pods were still functional. But it also meant their window of escape was shrinking. Most Federation research stations only carried enough pods for 150% of their normal complement, and this station housed nearly 200 researchers and staff. "We need to move," Marcus said, but as they prepared to leave their hiding spot, the Krylian in the lab looked up from the computer terminal and stared directly at them through the window. For a moment, Marcus found himself looking into compound eyes that reflected the red emergency lighting like fractured rubies. The creature's mandibles clicked rapidly, and Marcus didn't need a translator to understand the meaning. It had seen them. The Krylian moved toward the lab's exit with surprising speed for something so large. Marcus grabbed Dr. Voss's hand and pulled her down the corridor, abandoning any pretense of stealth. Behind them, they could hear the lab door sliding open and the sound of heavy footsteps on metal flooring. They reached a junction where 3 corridors met, and Marcus paused to consider their options. Straight ahead led to the pod bays, but it was also the most direct route and therefore the most likely to be watched. Left led to the station's main hub, where the Krylians had probably established their command post. Right led to the secondary maintenance levels, a maze of service tunnels and equipment rooms that most of the research staff never bothered to learn. Marcus had learned them. In his 3 months aboard the station, he'd mapped every conduit, every access panel, every backup system. It was part of his job to know how everything connected, how everything worked. His grandfather's philosophy again. You can't fix something if you don't understand how it's supposed to work. "This way," he said, pulling Dr. Voss toward the maintenance levels. The service tunnels were cramped and poorly lit, designed for accessibility rather than comfort. They had to crouch to move through some sections, and the constant hum of the station's life support systems made it difficult to hear if they were being followed. But they also provided multiple routes and hiding spots, advantages that might be crucial if the Krylians decided to pursue them. They emerged from the tunnels in the secondary pod bay, a smaller facility used primarily for cargo shuttles and emergency services. Marcus was relieved to see that 3 pods remained in their launch tubes, their status lights showing green for ready. The bay was empty except for an automated loading system that continued its programmed routine despite the chaos elsewhere on the station. "Thank the stars," Dr. Voss breathed, hurrying toward the nearest pod. "We can." She stopped mid-sentence, staring at something behind Marcus. He turned to see a Krillian warrior standing in the bay's main entrance, its energy weapon trained on them both. This one was smaller than the one they'd seen in the lab, but no less intimidating. Its chitin armor bore the distinctive markings of a Krillian assault specialist, and the weapon in its upper right arm was definitely military grade. "Do not move," it said in heavily accented but understandable Federation standard. "You will come with us." Marcus raised his hand slowly, trying to look as non-threatening as possible. "We're just civilians trying to evacuate. We don't have any information you'd want." The Krillian's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. All Federation personnel have value to us, human. You will board our ship." Dr. Voss whimpered softly beside him. Marcus could see her trembling, and he couldn't blame her. Being taken prisoner by the Krillians during their rebellion had been considered a fate worse than death. They had a reputation for treating captives as subjects for their biological experiments, a practice that had earned them condemnation from every civilized species in the galaxy. But something about this situation felt the warrior wasn't acting like the savage raiders from the historical accounts. Its movements were precise, professional. It held its weapon confidently, but without the aggressive posturing that Marcus would have expected from a species known for its warrior culture. "Why do you want prisoners?" Marcus asked, taking a small step forward. "What's this really about?" The Krillian's compound eyes focused on him with disturbing intensity. "You ask many questions for a prisoner, human. Perhaps you are not the simple maintenance worker your identification claims." That was interesting. The creature had obviously accessed the station's personnel files, which meant it knew exactly who he was supposed to be. Marcus Chen, civilian contractor, no military training, no security clearance above basic blue level. Just a guy who fixed things for a living. "I fix machines," Marcus said simply. "That's all I do." "Yes," the Krillian replied. "We know what you fix. We also know what you fixed on Kepler Station. And what you fixed on the research outpost at Rigel 7. Very interesting fixes for a simple maintenance worker." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. Kepler Station had been 8 months ago. Rigel 7 had been last year. How could this creature possibly know about those incidents? Those reports have been classified at the highest levels of Federation command. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. But even as the words left his mouth, he knew they sounded hollow. The Krillian's weapon never wavered. "Perhaps a change of environment will improve your memory. You will both come with us now." Dr. Voss looked at Marcus with desperate eyes. He could see the question she didn't dare ask aloud. What had he done at those other stations? What was he not telling her? The truth was something Marcus tried not to think about too often. The truth was that sometimes, when everything went wrong and people were dying and there was no one else available, a simple maintenance worker might find himself doing things that weren't in any manual, things that weren't supposed to be possible for someone with his training and clearance level. Things that apparently hadn't gone unnoticed. The Krillian gestured with its weapon toward the bay exit. "Move. Our ship is docked at the primary bay." "You will walk ahead of us and make no sudden movements." As they began to move, Marcus caught Dr. Voss's eye and gave her the smallest possible nod toward the pod bay controls. It was a desperate plan, but it might be their only chance. If he could distract the Krillian for just a few seconds, she might be able to trigger the emergency launch sequence for one of the remaining pods. He waited until they were almost at the exit, then suddenly stumbled and fell to his knees, crying out as if in pain. "My ankle, I think I twisted it." The Krillian warrior paused, its weapon still trained on them, but its attention momentarily focused on Marcus's apparent injury. In that instant of distraction, Dr. Voss moved with surprising speed, her forearms working in perfect coordination to slam her hand down on the pod bay emergency controls. Alarms began blaring, and the bay's atmospheric shields activated, sealing off the launch tubes. The automated voice began its launch countdown, and Marcus could see the nearest pod's engines beginning to glow with preparation fire. The Krillian spun toward Dr. Voss, but Marcus was already moving. His grandfather had taught him more than just tool maintenance. The old man had also been a veteran of Earth's last great war, and some lessons were passed down regardless of their official relevance. Marcus lunged forward, using his low position to drive his shoulder into the Krillian's midsection. The creature's natural armor absorbed most of the impact, but the surprise attack was enough to throw off its aim. Energy bolts scattered across the bay, leaving smoking craters in the metal walls. Dr. Voss dove for the nearest escape pod just as its launch sequence completed. The pod shot out of the bay like a bullet, carrying her away from the station and toward the safety of the system's patrol routes. One down, Marcus thought. One to go. The Krillian recovered quickly, bringing its weapon around toward Marcus with lethal intent. But in the few seconds it took to reacquire its target, Marcus had already rolled behind a cargo container and pulled something from his tool belt. His grandfather had always said that a good tool was worth more than a good weapon, but he'd never said that a good tool couldn't be a good weapon when the situation demanded it. The plasma torch Marcus pulled from his belt wasn't designed for combat. It was meant for cutting through ship hulls and welding structural repairs. But plasma was plasma, and in the right hands, any tool could serve a different purpose. The Krillian came around the cargo container just as Marcus activated the torch. The stream of superheated plasma caught the creature across its weapon arm, and the energy rifle flew across the bay in sparking pieces. For a moment, Marcus and the Krillian stared at each other across the small space. The creature's arm was damaged but not destroyed, its natural armor having absorbed the worst of the plasma's heat. It was still dangerous, still capable of killing him with its bare hands, but something had changed in its compound eyes. The professional confidence was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like respect. "You are not a simple maintenance worker," it said quietly. Marcus kept the plasma torch ready but didn't advance. "I told you. I fix things. Sometimes that includes fixing problems that try to hurt people." The Krillian's mandibles clicked in what Marcus was beginning to recognize as consideration. The reports from Kepler Station said that a civilian contractor had somehow managed to restore power to the defensive systems during a pirate raid. The reports from Rigel 7 said that same contractor had improvised a communication array that allowed the research team to call for help when their station was attacked by raiders. Both times, the contractor was listed as Marcus Chen, civilian, no military training. Marcus said nothing. What was there to say? That sometimes the universe put you in a position where doing nothing wasn't an option. That sometimes fixing things meant fixing the things that were trying to kill the people you'd been hired to help? Our intelligence suggested that these reports were either incorrect or that Marcus Chen was a cover identity for a Federation operative, the Krillian continued. But you are exactly what your file says you are, aren't you? A human civilian who simply refuses to let people die when he has the skills to prevent it. Something like that, Marcus admitted. The Krillian's weapon arm twitched, and for a moment Marcus thought the creature might try to attack with its damaged limb. Instead, it began backing toward the bay entrance. "This changes things," it said. "If the Federation truly has civilians capable of what you have accomplished, then our assumptions about human military potential may be significantly flawed." "What does that mean?" Marcus asked. "It means," the Krillian replied, reaching the bay exit, "that this war may be ending before it truly begins. And it means that you, Marcus Chen, may have just saved more lives than you realize." With that cryptic statement, the creature disappeared into the corridor, leaving Marcus alone in the pod bay with a plasma torch in his hand and more questions than answers. As the station continued to shudder around him from ongoing explosions, Marcus realized that whatever was happening here was much larger than a simple raid on a research facility. The Krillians had come here looking for something specific, and they'd found something they hadn't expected. A human civilian who didn't fit their understanding of human limitations. He made his way to the remaining escape pod, but before climbing inside, he took one last look around the bay. His tools were scattered across the floor where he'd dropped them during the fight. Part of him wanted to gather them up, to take the familiar weight of his grandfather's legacy with him. But there wasn't time. The station's structural integrity was failing, and he needed to get clear before the whole thing came apart. As his escape pod shot away from the dying research station, Marcus watched through the small viewport as the Krillian ships began their withdrawal. They'd gotten what they came for, whatever that was. But they'd also learned something they hadn't expected to learn. The question now was what they planned to do with that knowledge, and whether Marcus Chen, civilian contractor, would live long enough to find out. 3 days after the attack on Research Station Omega, 7 Marcus Chen found himself sitting in a Federation debriefing room that was trying very hard to look like anything other than an interrogation chamber. The walls were painted in soothing blue tones, the chairs were comfortable, and someone had even placed a small plant in the corner. But the one-way mirror, the recording devices, and the fact that he hadn't been allowed to leave for the past 18 hours gave away the room's true purpose. Across from him sat Commander Sarah Walsh, a career Federation intelligence officer whose reputation preceded her. She'd been the one to break the Centauri smuggling ring, the one who'd exposed the Vorthan spy network on Earth, and, according to rumor, the one who'd personally interrogated the Krillian leadership after their failed rebellion. If she was here, it meant someone very high up in the Federation command structure was taking this situation seriously. "Mr. Chen," Commander Walsh said, reviewing the datapad in her hands, "I've read your statement about the events on Omega 7 several times, and I have to admit I'm finding some parts difficult to believe." Marcus shifted in his chair, wishing he had his tools with him. Working with his hands always helped him think more clearly, but they'd taken his entire tool belt as potential evidence when his escape pod had been picked up by the Federation patrol ship Intrepid. "Which parts?" "Well, let's start with the part where you allegedly fought hand-to-hand with a Krillian assault specialist and won." She looked up from her pad, her green eyes sharp and calculating. "Krillian warriors are genetically engineered for combat. They have natural armor that can stop most small arms fire, reaction times that exceed any known human baseline, and strength levels that would allow them to literally tear a human apart. Yet you claim you overpowered one with the plasma torch." "I didn't overpower it," Marcus corrected. "I surprised it." "There's a difference." "Is there?" Commander Walsh leaned forward slightly. Because according to the Krillian prisoner we recovered from the station's wreckage, the warrior who encountered you reported something very interesting to its superiors before the retreat. It said, and I quote, "The human civilian displays combat capabilities inconsistent with his documented training and psychological profile." Marcus blinked. "You captured a Krillian?" "We captured 3, actually. All of them are claiming diplomatic immunity and demanding to speak with representatives from the Neutral Zone Authority. But that's not what we're here to discuss." She consulted her datapad again. "What we're here to discuss is why a simple maintenance contractor keeps finding himself at the center of situations that require highly specialized military skills." The door to the debriefing room slid open, and another figure entered. Marcus recognized him immediately. Admiral James Harrison, commanding officer of the Federation's 7th Fleet and one of the most decorated veterans in Starfleet history. If Commander Walsh's presence meant someone was taking this seriously, Admiral Harrison's presence meant someone was panicking. "Mr. Chen," Admiral Harrison said, taking a seat beside Commander Walsh, "thank you for your patience with our process. I know this has been a difficult few days for you." Marcus nodded cautiously. In his experience, when high-ranking military officers started thanking civilians for their patience, it usually meant they wanted something. "I've been reviewing your service record," the Admiral continued, "and I have to say it makes for fascinating reading. 3 separate incidents over the past 2 years, each involving an attack on a civilian facility, each resolved partly through your creative problem-solving skills." "I was just doing my job," Marcus said. "When systems break down, I fix them." "Yes, but the systems you've been fixing aren't exactly standard maintenance issues, are they?" Admiral Harrison pulled up a holographic display that filled the center of the room. "Kepler Station. During a pirate raid, you somehow managed to restore power to the defensive grid despite having no formal training in military systems. The engineering report says you bypassed 17 different security protocols and jury-rigged a power coupling system that shouldn't have been technically possible." Marcus remembered Kepler Station. The pirates had targeted the power distribution center first, a smart tactical move that had left the station defenseless. But they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed that disabling the main power grid would be enough. They hadn't counted on someone who understood that every Federation facility had backup systems, and that those backup systems could be connected to the main grid if you knew which circuits to cross and which safety protocols to ignore. "The connections were already there," Marcus said. "I just had to find them. At Rigel 7, Admiral Harrison continued, you constructed a subspace communication array from spare parts during an active siege. Again, despite having no formal training in quantum communications theory. The report from Dr. Sarah Kim states, and again I quote, "Mr. Chen's improvised array exceeded the performance specifications of our primary communication system by a factor of 3. Rigel 7 had been different. The attackers had been more sophisticated, using signal jammers to cut the research station off from any chance of calling for help. But Marcus had realized that the same principles that govern power distribution could be applied to signal transmission. It was just a matter of understanding how energy moved through different types of conduits." "And now Omega 7, the Admiral said, "where you not only fought off a Krillian warrior but apparently made such an impression that the Krillian command structure has filed a formal request through diplomatic channels to speak with you personally." Marcus straightened in his chair. "They want to talk to me?" Commander Walsh nodded grimly. "The message came through the Neutral Zone Authority 3 hours ago. The Krillian delegation is requesting a meeting with the human-civilian designated Marcus Chen to discuss what they're calling matters of mutual galactic security." "I don't understand," Marcus said. "What could they possibly want to discuss with me?" Admiral Harrison and Commander Walsh exchanged a look that Marcus didn't like. It was the kind of look that people shared when they were about to deliver bad news. "Mr. Chen," Admiral Harrison said carefully, "we believe the Krillians may have been testing us. Not just our defenses or our research capabilities, but our human resources. Specifically, they may have been trying to determine whether the incidents at Kepler Station and Rigel 7 represented isolated anomalies or something more systematic." "You think they attacked those stations because of me?" "We think they attacked those stations because they needed to understand what you represent," Commander Walsh said. "Think about it from their perspective. They're a warrior culture that values military prowess above all else. Suddenly they start hearing reports about human civilians performing feats that should require years of specialized training. What would you conclude?" Marcus thought about the Krillian warrior's words before it withdrew from the pod bay. "This changes things. If the Federation truly has civilians capable of what you have accomplished, then our assumptions about human military potential may be significantly flawed." "They think I'm some kind of secret weapon," Marcus realized. "Worse, Admiral Harrison said. "They think you're proof that every human civilian is a potential secret weapon, that humanity has been deliberately concealing our true capabilities behind a facade of peaceful exploration and scientific research. The implications of that hit Marcus like a physical blow. If an entire species of warriors believed that humanity was hiding its true military potential, it could destabilize the entire galactic political structure. The Federation's power had always been based on its role as a neutral mediator between species, a peaceful alliance dedicated to scientific advancement and mutual cooperation. If that image was shattered, if other species began to see humanity as a threat, there could be a war," Marcus said quietly. "There could be a war that makes the Krillian rebellion look like a minor border dispute," Admiral Harrison confirmed. "Unless we can convince them otherwise." Commander Walsh leaned forward. "Which brings us to why we need your help, Mr. Chen. The Krillians want to meet with you, and we think you should accept their invitation." Marcus stared at her. "You want me to meet with alien warriors who think I'm some kind of super soldier? We want you to meet with them and convince them that you're exactly what your file says you are, a civilian contractor with no military training who's just very good at solving problems under pressure," Admiral Harrison said. "If you can make them understand that your capabilities represent human ingenuity rather than hidden military training, then maybe we can defuse this situation before it spirals out of control." "And if I can't convince them?" The two officers exchanged another look. "Then we'll be facing the first interstellar war in Federation history," Commander Walsh said, "and it will be a war that we're not prepared to fight." Marcus sat back in his chair trying to process what he was being asked to do. 3 days ago, he'd been fixing a malfunctioning plasma coupling on a research station. Now he was being asked to prevent a galactic war by convincing an alien species that he wasn't the advanced scout for a human military force that didn't exist. "What exactly would this meeting involve?" he asked. "The Krillians have proposed a neutral venue," Admiral Harrison said. "Space Station Concordia, in the neutral zone. It's jointly administered by the Federation and the Krillian hegemony, with observers from a dozen other species. If anything goes wrong, you'll be under the protection of galactic law. And if nothing goes wrong, then you have a conversation with some very dangerous aliens who are capable of tearing apart the galactic peace with their bare hands. If they don't like what you have to say," Commander Walsh said bluntly. "No pressure." Marcus laughed despite himself. "When you put it like that, how can I refuse?" "You can refuse," Admiral Harrison said seriously. "This is entirely voluntary. We can't order a civilian to undertake a diplomatic mission, especially one this dangerous. If you decide not to go, we'll find another way to handle this situation." "What other way?" "We don't know yet," Commander Walsh admitted, "but we'll figure something out." Marcus looked around the debriefing room. Taking in the one-way mirror, the recording equipment, the two of the most powerful people in Federation Command sitting across from him asking for his help. 6 months ago, his biggest worry had been whether he'd be able to find work when his current contract expired. Now the fate of galactic peace apparently rested on his ability to convince alien warriors that he was nothing special. The irony wasn't lost on him. "If I agree to this," he said, "I want some guarantees." "Such as?" Admiral Harrison asked. "First, I want Dr. Voss protected. If the Krillians really are targeting people connected to me, she could be in danger." "Already done," Commander Walsh said. "Voss is in protective custody at a secure location. She'll remain there until this situation is resolved. Second, I want access to technical specifications for Concordia Station. If I'm going to be meeting with hostile aliens, I want to know exactly how everything on that station works." Admiral Harrison raised an eyebrow. "Planning an escape route?" "Planning to understand my environment," Marcus corrected. "You never know when you might need to fix something under pressure." "Reasonable," the Admiral agreed. "What else? I want my tools back." "Mr. Chen," Commander Walsh said, "you're going to a diplomatic meeting, not a repair job. I'm not sure tools are appropriate." Marcus looked at her steadily. "Commander, you're asking me to convince the Krillians that I'm just a maintenance worker who's good at improvising solutions. How exactly do you expect me to do that without the tools of my trade?" Another exchanged look between the officers. Admiral Harrison sighed. "You make a valid point. Very well, you can have your tools, but they'll need to be inspected by our security team first." "Fair enough," Marcus said. "When do we leave?" "The meeting is scheduled for 3 days from now," Commander Walsh said. "The diplomatic transport Hermes will take you to Concordia Station. You'll have escorts, but they'll maintain a low profile. The Krillians have specifically requested that this meeting appear to be a civilian interaction rather than a formal military negotiation." Because they want to assess the civilian capabilities of humanity, Marcus realized. Exactly. Which means you'll be walking into that meeting not just as Marcus Chen, the maintenance worker, but as a representative of every human civilian in the galaxy. The Krillians will be watching everything you do, analyzing every word you say, looking for evidence to support or refute their theories about hidden human military capabilities. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders like a heavy cloak. It was one thing to fix a broken machine under pressure. It was another thing entirely to fix a broken situation that could affect billions of lives. Any advice? He asked. Admiral Harrison leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. Be yourself, Mr. Chen. Don't try to be less than you are, but don't try to be more than you are either. The Krylians respect honesty and competence. Show them both, and maybe we can all walk away from this without starting a war. And if being myself isn't enough? Commander Walsh smiled grimly. Then we'll find out just how good you really are at fixing impossible problems. As the meeting concluded and Marcus was escorted back to his temporary quarters, he found himself thinking about his grandfather's old philosophy. A good tool was worth more than a good weapon. Tools built things, weapons just tore them down. But what happened when the thing you needed to build was peace itself? What tools did you use for a job like that? Marcus supposed he was about to find out. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and briefings. Federation linguists tried to teach him the basics of Krillian communication protocols, though they admitted that without the proper pheromone glands, he'd never be able to speak their language properly. Diplomatic specialists coached him on interspecies etiquette and the finer points of neutral zone law. Security analysts showed him detailed schematics of Concordia Station and walked him through emergency procedures. Through it all, Marcus found himself thinking about the 3 incidents that had brought him to this point. Kepler Station, Rigel 7, and Omega 7. Each time, he'd just been doing his job, fixing problems that needed fixing. He'd never thought of himself as anything special, certainly not as someone whose actions could influence galactic politics. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the reason the Krillians found him so confusing was precisely because he didn't think like a warrior or a strategist. He thought like someone whose job was to make broken things work again. On the morning of departure, as he stood in the docking bay watching the diplomatic transport Hermes prepare for launch, Marcus realized that this mission was really just another repair job. The thing that was broken was trust between species. The thing that needed fixing was the Krillian perception of human intentions. He checked his tool belt one more time, feeling the familiar weight of the instruments that had been his grandfather's legacy. Plasma torch, molecular welder, quantum scanner, emergency power cells. Simple tools for simple jobs. Except nothing about this job was going to be simple. Ready, Mr. Chen? Commander Walsh appeared beside him, wearing the dress uniform of a diplomatic escort. As ready as I can be, Marcus replied. Any last-minute advice? Remember that the Krillians value directness over diplomacy. If they ask you a question, give them a straight answer. Don't try to be clever or evasive. They'll respect honesty even if they don't like what you have to say. And if honesty isn't enough? Commander Walsh looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. Then we'll all find out together what comes next. As they boarded the Hermes and prepared for departure, Marcus took one last look at the Federation starbase through the transport's viewport. In 3 days, he'd either helped prevent a galactic war. For someone whose biggest ambition had been to fix machines and see the galaxy, it was a hell of a responsibility to carry. But then again, his grandfather had always said that the most important repairs were the ones nobody expected you to be able to make. Maybe this was just another one of those jobs. The Hermes launched smoothly into the star-filled darkness, carrying Marcus toward a meeting that would determine the future of human-alien relations. Behind them, the Federation starbase grew smaller and smaller until it was just another point of light in the vast cosmos. Ahead lay the neutral zone, and beyond that, a conversation that could change everything. Space Station Concordia hung in the void between stars like a monument to diplomatic optimism. The massive structure, built jointly by the Federation and the Krillian hegemony 15 years earlier, represented everything the galaxy's leaders hoped interspecies cooperation could achieve. Its gleaming hull reflected the light of the distant neutron star that served as the neutral zone's primary navigation beacon, and its rotating habitat rings generated artificial gravity for the dozens of species that called it home. Marcus Chen stood at the observation deck of the transport Hermes, watching Concordia grow larger as they approached their docking vector. The station was beautiful in its complexity, a perfect fusion of Federation engineering principles and Krillian architectural aesthetics. Clean lines and functional design met organic curves and artistic flourishes, creating something that belonged to no single species but somehow felt right to all of them. Impressive, isn't it? Commander Walsh joined him at the viewport, her diplomatic escort uniform crisp and formal. When they built this place, everyone said it would be impossible to reconcile such different design philosophies. The Federation engineers wanted everything to be modular and standardized. The Krillian architects wanted everything to be unique and artistically expressive. How did they make it work? Marcus asked, studying the station's external features with a maintenance worker's eye. He could see the underlying structure beneath the aesthetic elements, the practical considerations that had been necessary to make such an ambitious project function. They realized that both approaches had the same goal, Commander Walsh said: create something that works reliably for everyone who needs to use it. Once they focused on that shared objective instead of their different methods, the solutions became obvious. Marcus nodded, appreciating the parallel. It was the same principle that applied to any complex repair job. You had to understand what the system was supposed to accomplish before you could figure out how to fix it when it broke down. Speaking of which, Commander Walsh continued, have you given any more thought to how you want to approach this meeting? The Krillian delegation will be expecting you to either confirm or deny their theories about human military capabilities. Marcus had been thinking about little else during the 3-day journey. The briefings had made it clear that the Krillians weren't just curious about his individual abilities. They were trying to assess whether humanity represented a significant military threat to the existing galactic order. Their conclusions would influence not just Krillian policy, but the policies of every species that looked to the hegemony for leadership on security matters. I'm going to tell them the truth, Marcus said. I'm a maintenance worker who's good at solving problems. If they want to interpret that as evidence of some grand human conspiracy, that's their choice. The truth can be complicated, Mr. House. Chen. Different people can look at the same facts and reach very different conclusions. Marcus turned away from the viewport to face her directly. Commander, with respect, I think you're overthinking this. The Krillians are warriors, right? They value strength and competence and directness. Well, I may not be a warrior, but I'm competent at what I do, and I'm willing to be direct about it. If that's not enough for them, then maybe the problem isn't with my abilities. Maybe the problem is with their assumptions. Commander Walsh studied his face for a long moment. You know, Mr. Chen, I'm beginning to think Admiral Harrison was right about you. What did the Admiral say? He said that if anyone could convince the Krillians that humanity isn't a threat, it would be someone who genuinely doesn't understand why they might be considered threatening. She smiled slightly. Now I'm wondering if he was being brilliant. The transport's intercom crackled to life. Attention passengers, we are beginning our final approach to Concordia Station. Docking will commence in 15 minutes. Please secure any loose items and prepare for artificial gravity transition. Marcus checked his tool belt automatically, making sure everything was properly fastened. The inspection team back at the Federation starbase had been thorough but respectful, understanding that the tools were as much a part of his identity as they were instruments for his trade. They'd even allowed him to keep his grandfather's molecular welder, the one piece of equipment that was more sentimental than practical. Nervous? Commander Walsh asked. Focused, Marcus corrected. It's just another job. Understand the problem, identify the available resources, find a solution that works. And if the problem turns out to be more complicated than you expected? Marcus shrugged. Then I improvise. It's what I do. The docking procedure went smoothly, and within 30 minutes Marcus found himself walking through the corridors of Concordia Station. The internal design was even more impressive than the external architecture, with wide passages that could accommodate species of vastly different sizes and environmental controls that could adjust atmospheric composition on a room-by-room basis. Federation efficiency merged seamlessly with Krillian artistry, creating spaces that were both functional and beautiful. They were met at the docking ring by a tall, elegant figure in the purple robes of a neutral zone diplomatic attaché. Marcus recognized the species from his briefings. A Valerian, one of the silicon-based races that specialized in interspecies mediation. Their natural telepathic abilities made them excellent at detecting deception and managing complex negotiations. Welcome to Concordia Station, the Valerian said, its voice carrying the harmonic overtones characteristic of its species. I am diplomatic facilitator Zen-Ka Roth. I will be moderating today's discussions. Thank you, Commander Walsh replied formally. This is Marcus Chen, the civilian representative requested by the Krillian delegation. Zen-Ka Roth's large, multifaceted eyes focused on Marcus with disturbing intensity. Fascinating. Your thought patterns are quite unusual, Mr. Chen. Most humans in high-stress situations display significant anxiety responses. Your mental state appears to be remarkably calm. I'm treating this like work, Marcus explained. I do better when I can focus on the job instead of worrying about the consequences. An admirable approach. The Krillian delegation has expressed similar sentiments about the importance of focusing on practical matters rather than abstract concerns. Zen Ka Roth gestured down the corridor. If you would please follow me, the meeting room has been prepared according to both Federation and Krillian protocols. As they walked, Marcus noticed the subtle security presence throughout the station. Guards from multiple species were positioned at key intersections, their weapons and equipment carefully chosen to avoid favoring any particular alliance. The Neutral Zone Authority took its neutrality seriously, and Concordia Station represented one of the few places in the galaxy where potential enemies could meet without fear of treachery. The meeting room was a masterpiece of diplomatic architecture. Circular in design, with no clear head of the table, it provided equal space and prominence for all participants. The lighting could be adjusted for different species' visual requirements, the atmosphere could be modified for different breathing needs, and the furniture could be reconfigured for different physiologies. It was a room designed to make everyone comfortable while putting no one at an advantage. Marcus was surprised to find only 3 Krillians waiting for them. He had expected a larger delegation, perhaps a dozen warriors and diplomatic staff. Instead, he faced a single massive figure in elaborately decorated chitin armor, flanked by 2 smaller individuals in simpler dress. Mr. Chen, Zen Ka Ruth said formally, may I present War Leader Tak Kazeth of the Krillian Hegemony Strategic Analyst Vectanim and Combat Specialist HFY. The War Leader rose from his seat, and Marcus was struck by the sheer presence of the creature, even larger than the warrior he'd encountered on Omega. 7 Tak Kazeth radiated an aura of controlled violence that made every human survival instinct scream for caution. His chitin armor was decorated with intricate patterns that Marcus suspected represented military achievements, and his 4 arms moved with the precise coordination of someone who'd spent a lifetime perfecting the art of war. Marcus Chen, the war leader said, his Federation standard accented but clear. We meet at last. War leader? Marcus replied, offering the slight bow that his diplomatic briefings had indicated was appropriate for high-ranking Krillians. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. The gratitude is mine, Tak Kazeth replied, settling back into his seat. Your actions have raised questions that require answers, questions that may determine the future relationship between our peoples. Commander Walsh took her seat at Marcus's side, while Zen Ka Roth positioned himself at the room's neutral point. The Valerian's telepathic abilities would allow him to monitor the emotional undertones of the conversation and intervene if tensions escalated beyond manageable levels. Perhaps, strategic analyst Vecta Nim said, we should begin with a review of the facts as we understand them. Chen, you are listed in Federation records as a civilian contractor with no formal military training. Your educational background includes technical certification in systems maintenance and repair, with specializations in power distribution, life support systems, and emergency protocols. Is this accurate? Yes, Marcus said simply, yet in the past 2 years you have been present during 3 separate attacks on Federation facilities. In each case, you demonstrated capabilities that would normally require extensive military training. How do you explain this discrepancy? Marcus considered his answer carefully. The temptation was to downplay his abilities, to make himself seem as ordinary as possible. But the briefings had emphasized the importance of honesty, and something in the war leader's compound eyes suggested that evasion would be interpreted as deception. I'm good at understanding how systems work, Marcus said. When those systems break down, I can usually figure out how to fix them or work around the problems. Sometimes the systems that are broken include defensive systems, communication systems, or other things that happen to be important during an emergency. Combat Specialist HFY leaned forward slightly. The warrior who encountered you on Omega 7 reported that you moved with combat-trained reflexes and demonstrated tactical awareness beyond civilian parameters. Do you have an explanation for these observations? Marcus thought about the fight in the pod bay, trying to analyze his own actions from an outside perspective. I grew up working with my hands, he said finally. My grandfather taught me that, when you're working with dangerous equipment, you need to be aware of everything around you at all times. One moment of inattention can get you killed. I guess that kind of awareness carries over to other situations. Your grandfather, strategic analyst Vecta Nim said, consulting a datapad. According to our research, he was a maintenance worker on Earth's early orbital installations. No military service record. That's right. He always said that tools were more important than weapons because tools build things and weapons just tear them down. War leader Tak Kazeth's mandibles clicked in what Marcus was learning to recognize as consideration. An interesting philosophy, yet used a tool as a weapon when confronted by our warrior. I used a tool to solve a problem, Marcus corrected. The problem was that someone was trying to hurt people I'd been hired to protect. The plasma torch was the most effective solution available. You felt responsible for protecting the other civilians on the station? Of course. They were in danger, and I had the ability to help. What else was I supposed to do? The three Krillians exchanged a series of rapid clicks and chittering sounds that Marcus's translator couldn't parse. The conversation went on for several minutes, with occasional glances in his direction. Finally, War Leader Tak Kazeth returned his attention to Marcus. Mr. Chen, we have been operating under the assumption that your capabilities represent either concealed military training or evidence of a broader Federation program to develop enhanced civilian operatives. Based on this conversation, we are beginning to consider a third possibility, which is that your capabilities are simply the natural result of human psychology and training methods applied to practical problems. That what we have interpreted as military potential may actually be civilian potential that happens to be applicable to military situations. Marcus nodded. That sounds about right. Strategic analyst Vectanim leaned forward. If this interpretation is correct, it raises disturbing implications for our strategic planning. We have based our military assessments on the assumption that human civilians represent a non-combatant population. If that assumption is incorrect, it's not incorrect, Marcus said quickly. Most humans aren't like me. Most people in maintenance positions aren't like me. I'm just someone who's been lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time with the right skills. Or, War Leader Tak Kazeth said quietly, you are someone who has been in the wrong place at the wrong time with the right skills. 3 times. What are the statistical probabilities of such a coincidence? Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He'd never thought about it in those terms before. 3 attacks, 3 different locations, 3 situations where his specific skill set had made the difference between success and failure. When you looked at it that way, it did seem unlikely to be pure chance. You think someone's been deliberately putting me in those situations? He asked. We think, combat specialist Hawk Shavor said, that the Federation may be more subtle in its military preparations than we previously believed. Rather than training obvious super soldiers, you may be developing individuals who appear to be civilians but possess capabilities that become relevant during crisis situations. Marcus shook his head. That's not possible. I choose my own assignments. I go where the work is good and the pay is fair. Nobody's been directing my career choices. Are you certain? Strategic analyst Vecta Nim pulled up a holographic display. According to our analysis, all 3 facilities where you were working came under attack within 6 months of your arrival. The attacks targeted research projects that could have significant military applications. In each case, your presence prevented the attackers from achieving their primary objectives. The display showed a timeline of Marcus's work history over the past 3 years. Dozens of assignments at Federation facilities throughout the galaxy, most of them routine maintenance contracts lasting a few weeks to a few months. But 3 of those assignments stood out in stark relief. Kepler Station, Rigel 7, and Omega 7. 3 facilities conducting research that could change the balance of galactic power. I would be so happy 3 facilities that had come under attack while Marcus happened to be there. This is impossible, Marcus said, but even as he spoke the words, he could feel doubt creeping into his mind. The pattern was undeniable. The coincidences were too convenient to be natural. Commander Walsh had been silent throughout the exchange, but now she spoke for the first time since the formal introductions. Mr. Chen, have you ever been approached by Federation intelligence? Any unofficial contacts? Any suggestions about which assignments might be particularly interesting or lucrative? Marcus started to shake his head, then stopped. There had been someone, hadn't there? A man named David Torres who'd contacted him about the Kepler Station job? He'd said he represented a civilian contracting agency that specialized in placing skilled workers at high-priority facilities. The pay had been exceptional, and the work had seemed routine enough. There was a contractor, Marcus said slowly. He offered me the Kepler Station job, said they needed someone with my particular skill set for some high-priority maintenance work. What kind of skill set? War Leader Tak Kazeth asked. Emergency systems repair. He said they'd had some problems with their backup power grid and needed someone who could work under pressure to get everything running properly. Marcus felt sick as the implications became clear. The attack came 3 days after I finished installing the new power coupling system. Strategic analyst Vectanim manipulated the holographic display, bringing up additional information. David Torres, civilian contractor. No official connection to Federation intelligence, but our sources suggest he operates what humans call a shell company for various government agencies. His organization has placed personnel at 17 Federation facilities over the past 5 years. 11 of those facilities have subsequently been targeted for attack or espionage. Marcus stared at the data, trying to process what he was seeing. You're saying I've been used? That someone's been deliberately putting me in harm's way so I'd be there to stop attacks that they somehow knew were coming? We're saying that the Federation appears to have developed a novel approach to facility defense, War Leader Tak Kazeth replied. Rather than posting obvious military guards, they place individuals like you in positions where your natural skills and instincts can be applied to security problems. From an outside observer's perspective, it appears that the facilities are lightly defended. From a practical perspective, they have defenders who can adapt to unexpected threats because they don't think like traditional military personnel. Combat Specialist Hakshavor clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. It is actually quite brilliant. Most species would attempt to defeat facility defenses by overwhelming them with superior firepower or by exploiting known tactical weaknesses, but how do you plan an attack against a defender who doesn't follow standard tactical doctrine because he doesn't know what standard tactical doctrine is? Marcus felt a mixture of anger and admiration. Anger at being manipulated, at being placed in danger without his knowledge or consent, but also admiration for whoever had devised such an elegant solution to a complex problem. It was exactly the kind of thinking he appreciated in his own work. Unconventional solutions that worked precisely because they approached problems from unexpected angles. The question, strategic analyst Vecta Neem said, is whether this represents a broader Federation strategy or an isolated program targeting specific facilities. If the Federation has developed methods for creating enhanced civilian defenders on a large scale, it would fundamentally alter the galactic balance of power. Zen-Ka Roth, who had been monitoring the conversation with the detached interest of a neutral observer, suddenly straightened in his chair. I believe we may be overlooking a simpler explanation, he said. All eyes turned to the Valerian mediator. His telepathic abilities gave him unique insight into the emotional and intellectual dynamics of the conversation, and his interventions were usually significant. Mr. Chen, Zen-Ka Roth said, May I ask what you believe to be your most important personal quality? Marcus blinked, surprised by the question. I guess I don't like to leave things broken when I can fix them. And how do you define broken? Anything that isn't working the way it's supposed to work. Machines that won't start, systems that won't respond, people who are in danger when they should be safe. Zen-Ka Roth turned to the Krillian delegation. I have been monitoring Mr. Chen's emotional and intellectual responses throughout this conversation. His reactions to your revelations about the pattern of attacks are genuine. He truly did not know that his assignments were connected. But more importantly, his motivation for his actions is exactly what he claims it to be. He sees problems that need fixing, and he fixes them. It is not a military mindset or a result of secret training. It is simply who he is. War leader Tak Kazeth studied Marcus with renewed interest. You are suggesting that the Federation has not created enhanced defenders so much as they have identified individuals whose natural personality traits make them effective in crisis situations. Exactly, Zen-Ka Roth said. The question is not whether humanity has been secretly developing super soldiers. The question is whether humanity naturally produces individuals who think of problems in terms of solutions rather than threats, who respond to crises with creativity rather than violence, and who feel personal responsibility for the welfare of those around them. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications of the Valerian's analysis. Finally, strategic analyst Vecta Neem spoke. If this interpretation is correct, then our fundamental assumptions about human psychology and capability may need to be revised. We have been evaluating humanity based on the model of other species, where civilian and military populations have clearly defined and separate roles. But if human civilians naturally possess qualities that translate into effective crisis response, then, War Leader Hakazeth finished, humanity may be far more dangerous than we ever imagined, not because they are secretly training warriors, but because they don't need to. They are a species where the line between civilian and combatant may be much more fluid than we assumed. Marcus looked around the table at the faces of beings who held the power to determine the future of galactic peace. Warriors and strategists and diplomats, all struggling to understand something that seemed perfectly normal to him. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I don't think it's as complicated as you're making it. Most humans just want to live their lives and be left alone. But when something threatens that, when someone tries to hurt the people or places we care about, we tend to get creative about solving the problem. It's not military training or secret programs. It's just who we are. War leader Tak Kazeth's mandibles clicked slowly, and For the first time since the meeting began, Marcus detected something that might have been approval in the creature's compound eyes. "Indeed," the war leader said. "And perhaps that is exactly what makes humanity so formidable." The revelation that Marcus had been unknowingly manipulated by Federation intelligence hung over the meeting like a dark cloud. War leader Takazeth and his delegation spent the next hour reviewing additional data they'd compiled about human behavioral patterns, while Marcus struggled to process the implications of what he'd learned about his own career. "Mr. Chen," strategic analyst Vectanim said, pulling up another holographic display, "we have been monitoring Federation personnel assignments for several years as part of our ongoing security assessment. What we have discovered may be of interest to you." The display showed a galactic map dotted with hundreds of Federation facilities. Some were highlighted in green, others in yellow, and a few in red. Marcus could see the pattern immediately. The red dots represented facilities that had been attacked or compromised. The yellow ones were facilities that had experienced security incidents, and the green ones remained secure. "Each facility has been color-coded based on its security history over the past 5 years, Vectanim explained. "But look at this subset of data." The display changed, filtering the information to show only facilities where personnel matching Marcus's skill profile had been assigned. The pattern was startling. Every facility with a maintenance specialist possessing emergency systems expertise remained green. No attacks, no security breaches, no compromised research. "You're not the only one," combat specialist HFY said bluntly. "Our analysis suggests that the Federation has placed individuals with similar capabilities at over 40 facilities throughout their territory. Each assignment was arranged through civilian contracting agencies with no obvious government connections. Each specialist was recruited for ostensibly routine maintenance work." Marcus stared at the data, feeling a mixture of relief and unease. Relief that he wasn't uniquely manipulated, but unease at the scope of what appeared to be a systematic program. "How many people are we talking about?" he asked. "At least 60 individuals with technical backgrounds and demonstrated ability to improvise solutions under pressure," Vectanim replied. "Maintenance workers, systems analysts, emergency repair specialists, communications technicians, all civilians, all with clean backgrounds, all with the kind of practical intelligence that translates into effective problem-solving during crises." Commander Walsh had been taking notes throughout the discussion, but now she looked up with concern. "This is the first I've heard of any systematic program. If what you're describing is accurate, it represents a significant intelligence operation that wasn't authorized by normal channels." War leader Takazeth's mandibles clicked with what Marcus was beginning to recognize as dark amusement. "Commander Walsh, your superiors have created a defensive network so subtle that even their own military leadership doesn't know it exists. It is either the most brilliant strategic deception in galactic history or the most dangerous rogue operation we have ever encountered." Before Commander Walsh could respond, the meeting room's communication system chimed softly. Zen Ka Roth touched a control panel, and the voice of a Concordia Station communications officer filled the room. "Diplomatic Facilitator Zen Ka Roth, we have an urgent message for the Federation delegation. Priority 1 encryption, Admiral Harrison's authorization." Commander Walsh straightened in her chair. "Put it through to my personal communicator." "Negative, Commander. The message is specifically for civilian contractor Marcus Chen." Admiral Harrison's instructions were explicit. "Mr. Chen is to receive this communication immediately, regardless of current meeting status." Marcus felt a chill of apprehension. "I'll take it." The communication system shifted to a secure channel, and Admiral Harrison's voice emerged from the speakers with obvious urgency. "Mr. Chen, I apologize for interrupting your diplomatic meeting, but we have a developing situation that requires your immediate attention." "What kind of situation, Admiral?" 3 hours ago, we lost contact with Research Station Prometheus in the Vega system. The station's automated distress beacon activated briefly before going silent. Long-range sensors show multiple unidentified ships in the area. Marcus exchanged glances with the Krillian delegation. "Pirates? Unknown. But, Mr. Chen, here's the critical factor. Station Prometheus is staffed by over 300 researchers, and their current project involves experimental quantum weapons technology. If that research falls into the wrong hands, it could destabilize the entire galactic balance of power." Strategic analyst Vectanim leaned forward. "Admiral Harrison, this is Vectanim of the Krillian Hegemony. Are you requesting Mr. Chen's assistance with this crisis?" There was a pause before Admiral Harrison responded. "I'm requesting his expertise, yes. Station Prometheus has several unique systems that may require unconventional repair approaches if they've been damaged by hostile action." Mr. Chen's track record suggests he may be our best option for restoring critical functions quickly. War Leader Thak Kazeth's compound eyes focused on Marcus with laser intensity. How convenient that another crisis has developed requiring your specific skills, Mr. Chen. One might almost think these emergencies are being orchestrated. That's impossible, Commander Walsh said quickly. Admiral Harrison wouldn't... She stopped mid-sentence, apparently realizing the same thing that was occurring to Marcus. If there really was a rogue intelligence operation using civilian contractors as unwitting defensive assets, how high up in the Federation command structure might it extend? Admiral, Marcus said carefully, how did you know to contact me here? This meeting was supposed to be classified. Another pause. Mr. Chen, I think we need to discuss this situation in person. How quickly can you return to Federation space? Admiral War Leader Takazeth interrupted. Perhaps it would be more efficient if we accompanied Mr. Chen to this crisis. The Krillian hegemony has a vested interest in ensuring that experimental weapons technology doesn't fall into unauthorized hands. War Leader? I appreciate the offer, but this is a Federation internal matter. Is it? Combat Specialist Haksha Vor asked. Mr. Chen has just spent the morning demonstrating that the line between Federation civilian and military operations is not as clear as your government claims. If this crisis is another example of orchestrated deployment of enhanced civilian assets, then it affects the security interests of every species in the galaxy. Marcus found himself at the center of a rapidly escalating diplomatic crisis. The Krillians clearly suspected that the attack on Station Prometheus was another manufactured emergency designed to test or showcase human capabilities. Admiral Harrison's insistence on involving Marcus specifically seemed to support that theory. But if the attack was real and the station's research was genuinely at risk, then political considerations became secondary to the safety of 300 civilians and the security of dangerous technology. I need to go, Marcus said finally. Whether this is a real crisis or some kind of test, there are people who might need help. That's more important than diplomatic protocols. Zenkaroth had been monitoring the discussion with growing concern. Mr. Chen, I must point out that if you leave Concordia Station now, before this meeting has reached a formal conclusion, it could be interpreted as evidence that the Federation is not negotiating in good faith. The political ramifications could be severe. Then don't let me go alone, Marcus replied, looking directly at War Leader Takazeth. You said the Krillian hegemony has an interest in preventing weapons technology from falling into the wrong hands. Come with me. See for yourself whether this is a real emergency or an elaborate deception. The war leader's mandibles clicked rapidly as he considered the proposal. You would willingly allow Krillian observers to witness Federation emergency response procedures? I'd willingly allow anyone to witness me trying to help people who are in trouble, Marcus said. If that happens to include observing Federation emergency response procedures, so be it. Mr. Chen, I don't have the authority to approve Krillian military personnel accompanying a Federation emergency response mission. Then don't approve it, Marcus said. I'm a civilian contractor. I can request whatever technical assistance I think I need to complete my job. If I think Krillian expertise might be useful, that's my professional judgment. Strategic analyst Vecta Nim pulled up another data display. War Leader, Station Prometheus's research focuses on quantum resonance weapons systems. Our own scientists have been working on similar projects. We could provide genuine technical assistance if the station's systems have been damaged. Admiral Harrison's voice crackled through the communication system. This is highly irregular. I can't authorize foreign military personnel to participate in a classified Federation operation. War Leader Tak Kazeth rose from his chair, his massive form radiating authority. Admiral Harrison, consider this. If Mr. Chen's assessment is correct and this crisis is genuine, then Krillian assistance could be invaluable in resolving it quickly. If the crisis is artificial, then our presence will provide independent verification of that fact. Either way, our participation serves the interests of galactic stability. And if I refuse, then the Krillian hegemony will be forced to conclude that the Federation is indeed orchestrating false emergencies for unknown strategic purposes. Our response to that conclusion will be appropriate to the perceived threat level. Marcus could hear the thinly veiled threat in the war leader's words. If the Krillians became convinced that the Federation was manipulating galactic security for its own ends, the result could be the very war that this meeting had been designed to prevent. Admiral, Marcus said, I think we need to trust each other here. Let the Krillians come along as observers. If the crisis is real, we'll all work together to solve it. If it's not real, then at least we'll all know the truth. A long silence stretched across the communication channel. Finally, Admiral Harrison spoke. Very well, Mr. Woodmer, Chen, but understand that this decision is entirely your responsibility. If this goes wrong, the diplomatic consequences will be severe. Understood, Admiral. How long do we have to get to the Vega system? At maximum warp, approximately 18 hours. But Mr. Chen, there's something else you need to know about Station Prometheus. According to our records, it was one of the facilities where our intelligence services placed a civilian technical specialist through a contracting agency. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Someone like me? Someone exactly like you. Elena Vasquez, emergency systems specialist, hired 3 months ago to upgrade the station.